Well, good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
And thank you for coming to our sixth class meeting. And today we have a new guest we haven't had before, Bennie Maupin. Bennie Maupin is very important in the history of jazz because of his connections and his part that he played in some very, I would say, revolutionary, in fact, new things that were happening in jazz in the 60s. And 70s. He was on the recording of Miles Davis' Bitches Brew. He worked with Herbie Hancock and many, many other very, very famous and influential musicians in the history of jazz. And today I'm very happy to have him here with us, and will give us the opportunity to actually hear about those very important moments in the history and the development of jazz from someone who was part of that.
I think that maybe I should just give you an idea of the impact of certain recordings on me. Namely, the one that I want to talk about is called Kind of Blue. Is everyone familiar with Kind of Blue? Well, Kind of Blue, of course, was recorded and was released in 1959. I was either 18 or 19, depending on the time of the year that it came out, but I remember it. And from that time to this, it's become like part of the soundtrack of my life. Music is a very powerful force, as you know. And when it has something in it for you, no one has to tell you, because it's a listening art, and when you hear it, your life will respond to it if your life is programmed to respond to it somehow from whatever means. So this particular music opened up a lot of doorways and changed the way I thought about improvisation. Up to that point, I had been busy learning all of the language that I could from the bebop period, because that was the music that was the most dominant in the community that I lived in. So I'm from Detroit, just as Kenny Burrell is. And Kenny has had a profound effect on so many people, musically and educationally, that it's just beyond words. I mean, you could never express it really, but the effect that he's had on me, he has no idea. Because it was Kenny and some musicians from his generation who created an environment for younger generations to be able to come and actually hear musicians perform. There was a place that they created. It was a performance space in the city of Detroit. It was created during the 50s, and it was called the World Stage. There's also a World Stage here in Los Angeles. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But it's a breeding ground for young musicians. It's a great place to come listen to people. And in Detroit, it was absolutely very fertile. Because if you weren't 21, you couldn't go into the clubs, which meant that you could not really hear the music other than recordings, or you could come to a place like this. In Detroit, like I said, it was difficult to go hear the music if you weren't 21, because it was presented in nightclubs. And there was this one particular club that had everyone that you would ever want to go hear if you knew about the music. And of course, they had the sextet. And they came there, to the best of my knowledge, they only came one time, because they really didn't stay together that long. So I would go to this place. The name of the place was Klein's Show Bar. And I would go to this place and stand outside, and when the door opened, I could kind of peek in, and I could kind of get it, you know. And the guys who worked there, they were really nice. I mean, they could see that I really wanted the music. So they said, well, we can't have you just standing here in the doorway like this. Because he asked me how old I was. I think I was like, you know, I was 18 and 19, but I wasn't 21, so I still couldn't get in. So he says, I'll tell you what, I'll open the window for you in the men's room, and it's right near the bandstand. You can hear everything. So that's how I got it.
There you go.
And I would just stand there next to the men's room window and just be in heaven.
That's great.
I lived a few blocks from the main library in Detroit. And because of the library, I was able to have endless supplies of recordings of all kinds of music, but especially classical music. So I spent a lot of time in the library. I think I probably went to the library 5 times a week. It was just a short walk. I would just do my homework there. And you could have the machine for an hour, but I was like the guy who always wanted more. You know, so pretty soon they sort of said, well, if they don't come in 5 minutes, you can have it for another hour, you know. So I was always there listening. But if I went to the library 3 times a week, there were 2 people that I would see in the library. The gentleman we just mentioned, Billy Frazier, and Dr. Yusuf Lateef. They would be in the library. And I would see them, and I was so shy, I couldn't walk over and say, hi, I know who you guys are, and I just want to say hi. You know, how awkward you can be sometimes. So I made it a point to start walking near where they were. I would find, you know, because they got books all around, and they were just sitting there, you know, at these big tables. And I saw them, they were reading something. And when I got near where they were actually reading scores. So they were there studying these scores. And I said, wow, look at all that. I'd never really seen a score until I saw it lying there on the table, and it's like massive, and it's just like tons of information on it, you know, and they're pointing to it and talking about it and writing in their memo pads notes about it. And that really just triggered something in me that I should really seriously study, that this is very serious, you have to study. So all of this was going on in Detroit during those formative years for myself and for my peers who were there. And then this music comes along, which really opened the door for a whole different way to view things. And from that point onward, there was a lot of controversy. A lot of people felt that the music no longer was valid because of the absence of chords as we had known them, or playing variations over standard songs. Do you follow me? Which was something that we did a lot. During the bebop era, that was prevalent. But here, this music came along, and it was all original, which was quite different. And the way the recording was approached was quite different. Normally, when you hear a recording by a trumpet player, the first thing you're going to hear is the trumpet. But on this recording, and I want to play an example of it for you so we can just sort of get a glimpse into it a little bit. On this recording, Miles Davis starts out the recording with the piano and the bass. And the bass's role is to play the melody. So prior to this recording, I don't remember hearing anyone starting a recording with the bass playing the melody. It's all connected. It's not like it's, you know, this segment over here and this segment over there. It's really not. This recording really shows like a tremendous connection from the past. So much a part of it was the concept of a rhythm section and a soloist. It started to be more a collective improvisation, so that the ensemble as a whole is actually creating something without feeling that any one person is actually leading the performance. Very different ways of looking at it, you know, but each generation has its own mission to create tension and to hopefully come forward with new ideas. So the vocabulary took a big shift during that period. There started to be like a separation. Some musicians were moving more towards playing in this direction. Other musicians were very comfortable playing bebop as they had always done, and there was a certain amount of conflict. Either if you were in the free camp, then you were in the free camp. If you were in the bebop camp, you were in the bebop camp. And the twain were like conflict.
Benny,
yes.
I want to ask you, most of these people in here are not music majors.
Okay.
So a couple of things. For example, could you explain a little bit more about what you mean by free camp and the other?
Okay. We're talking about the music, but let me give you an idea. I had mentioned earlier that a lot of the music prior to this came from the bebop tradition. But in the during this new period in the early '60s, musicians started to experiment more with scales, sometimes music with no melodic element at all, but music that was primarily driven by rhythmic elements. Just experimenting. I think that Indian music started to have an influence, and John Coltrane was responsible for bringing that out a lot, as well as Yusuf Lateef. They were starting to experiment with these different forms, and so I think that many of the really young musicians, the ones who were influenced by the music, they wanted to be a part of it so much they felt that they could do what was being done. And so with no background whatsoever, no theory, no knowledge of an instrument, they started to play, and it started to be identified as a free form of expression, which created a lot of distinction between them and older musicians who after maybe close listening or close contact with them realized that they weren't really knowledgeable of what they were doing.
I was wondering if it would be possible to give an example to the students of the difference between something that follows, let's say, a harmony or particular chord changes, and something that is more maybe scale-based or based on something else that it's...
I'll play a tune for him.
Okay.
Got a great pianist right here. He'll give you great examples.
One of the aspects of bebop music is that there's a lot of chord changes. And one of the kind of tests of a musician in the bebop period was, could you cover all those chord changes? As time went on, musicians wanted to be a little bit more free. And I think that's the force behind what started to happen then with the use of scales and getting away from playing on specific patterns of chord changes. As we heard on the tune So What, basically the song So What, I don't know how much you guys have analyzed that or listened to it yet, but...
Some of them actually did it for the last assignment, so they listened to it at least 10 times.
Oh, great, okay, so you're totally familiar with it. Well, you know then it actually has two chords. In So What, you have... Incidentally, if you want to look at that voicing, can I show that real quick?
I was just going to ask you to explain that E minor down to D minor.
I'll show you what that is. Basically, let's see. It could be considered sort of an E minor 11 over D back to D minor 7 with an 11. After this, and people started to play with this, people started then to play and improvise very freely, sometimes without any kind of tonal centers, without any kind of basis, and it became much more like a dialogue. Can you talk about Miles' role in bringing about the band with Wayne Shorter and bringing about the Bitches Brew record? Was, besides his playing, but he obviously had, amongst all the talents and vision that he had, but he had a way of bringing the right people together.
I think so.
Right?
I talked to Herbie a lot about it, his involvement, because Herbie was with Miles for 5.5 years. And he said, Miles never once told him what to play. But he did tell him what not to play.
That's huge.
A few times.
Uh-huh.
You know, he said, well, wait a moment, I want you to play. Don't play that.
Did he ever tell you that? Did he give you much instruction or direction? Or?
Okay, we flashed from 1959 to 1969.
Right, 10 years later.
10 years later. By now, I've been able to generate work for myself in New York. I've been able to make some recordings. I've been able to develop, which is most important, and to be a part of a great tradition. It was Jack DeJohnette that asked Miles to hire me because Wayne Shorter was getting ready to leave and go and join Zoe's Avenue to form Weather Report. Things are going on. I mean, I had gotten to a point where Miles Davis actually call me to be on a recording with him. You know, it doesn't get any better than that. You know, not really. You know, for me at that point, that was the grandest thing that could have happened to me. Because I said, wow, you know, he represents so much history. And he asked me to come and play. But I'll tell you one thing, it was really quite a bit of work being in there. That was like being in a cauldron. And we were all in it together, and the fire was hot. But it was a peaceful fire. He was very, very sweet. But he was very, very determined to bring out the best in us. He never told anyone what to play, especially me. I mean, when you listen to this recording, it's like it's my recording. I play all over it. But he wanted contrast. He wanted lots of different elements in it. I mean, now, in retrospect, after I've listened to it as many times as I have, I realize what he wanted. But at the time, it was like, it was outrageous. I mean, there was hardly nothing to go on. You know, he'd have these little sketches, and they would look real feeble, and, you know, a couple of notes here, and a couple of things, and it was like looking at hieroglyphics. And I would say, wow. And then one morning, what really killed me was this. A couple of times, he got me real good, to really provoke me to just go beyond what I thought I could do, and to just be in the moment. You know, I was so busy thinking. I guess he sensed it. And so he comes over to me, we're standing there, and we're warming up on one of the pieces, and he simply looked at me and he says, why don't you play? I can't think of anything. And it was just like, he just handed me this gift. Just be yourself. That's what he said to me. After that, I felt so free. And when you hear it, I mean, you know, I scream and I shout. It's joyful. I just felt great. Then another time, he asked me to play a triad. Well, on a bass clarinet, you can't play a triad unless you play separate tones. A triad is 3 tones, 3 consecutive tones. Yeah, at one time. On the piano, simple deal. 3 fingers, you got it. So he asked me to play a triad. And so immediately, I'm saying, wow, what does he mean? I can't play a triad. But that's not what he's asking me. I mean, his messages were always kind of thought-provoking. Everything he ever said to me provoked me to do something. So I just started thinking. I said, no, he doesn't mean a triad. He means something with 3, something that represents 3. So on one of these pieces, I can't remember which one it was. It might be Miles Runs the Voodoo Down. I start the piece kind of playing, and I just start with 3 separate tones, and it kind of goes like, bo-do-do, bo-dee-da, bo-do-dee, do-bo-dee-da. Those were my triads. After we played that, I never heard it. He looked at me and he said, that's exactly what I wanted. So the only feedback I got from the man himself. I got it from Miles. Every morning when I got to the studio, he was already there. I mean, you've heard a lot of stories about him and his drug addiction and all that. At this time, Miles was absolutely healthy. We recorded from 10 to 1 every day at Columbia Studios that we did this. At 1 o'clock, he was out of there. He went straight to the gym to train with his boxing trainer. That's what he did. Yeah, there's no drugs. And each morning, his feedback was like, wow. I mean, he was unlike I didn't know what to expect, but he was unlike what I thought was going to happen. This guy was, he had an incredible sense of humor. Was there every day, bright, looked like they had a good night's rest, was excited. He would always say, oh man, what happened yesterday was remarkable. You know, I realized that I wouldn't have been there if he didn't think I could really do what he wanted. But again, he never told me what he wanted. So I just gave him what I had, which was just totally from my heart. He just wanted me to express myself. There were no chords, there were a couple of melodies. I got to mirror him a lot, which I think he really liked because here's the trumpet, here's the bass clarinet, so you have this total contrast. And the way I would play with him sometimes, I would just play just a little bit behind him. So it would just be like a reflection of what he played. And then sometimes I would play right on with him. But I discovered that he kind of liked it when I played behind because that created something. Miles came with a whole different approach to it. He heard it different. He had something else to say, which was in the lower part of the trumpet, which gave him a real, great sound. And then once he added the mute to his sound, that established the identity. He always found a way to capture some special moments just with that gorgeous sound he had and just the inflections and the beautiful tone quality, I wanted to play like Miles, only on the saxophone. I can get a little bit close when I play soprano, but close but no enchilada.
Please, let's give Bennie Maupin another round of applause. Thank you.